This is David Archer, and I'm here with Fredrick Knight at his family home place called Malbone. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the history of Malbone and the other family properties that were surrounding it, how the Stiles family came to be here, and a little bit about the Stiles family in Savannah and maybe even before. Very distinguished family, both on every side of Fredrick's family tree. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. First, Fredrick, tell me, what is Malbone?
Well, the Malbone, the name, is a very notable miniaturist, of course, back before they had photographs. The people who wanted to preserve family images would have them painted, and the guy's name's, I believe it's Godfrey, I'm not sure.
It is.
He was from Newport, Rhode Island, and painted primarily miniatures on ivory, and he was a cousin of the Stiles family, and so that's what Malbone is named for.
I noticed, of course, William Henry Stiles would be your what?
Three greats.
Okay.
Great.
And he was the first Stiles to actually come to Bartow County, or as it was, Cass County?
I think he came to Cass County, I guess, during the Cherokee Land Lottery.
Yeah.
1840s.
I've heard that he may have actually been involved in some dealings with the Cherokees with regards to the removal, and he was I think a lawyer from Savannah.
He was. He graduated. Well, I say graduated from Yale. He went to Yale. I know back in the day they would go, but not necessarily graduate. But at any rate, he was a lawyer and a politician. And I don't know what. I know he was in the state house.
He was Speaker of the House in Georgia after he moved to Cass County, and he was actually in Congress prior to that, in the United States Congress.
Right.
And I believe he was appointed by President James K. Polk to some diplomatic position.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know a lot about it. I know he was. It was to Austria, and Charge d'Affaires is the. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, but that's
the way I say it.
That's the title.
Doesn't matter if you and I say it that way.
But I know that he was also an author and wrote a fairly lengthy book about Austrian.
I actually found that and bought it recently.
Yeah.
It's a 2-volume set, and I think it's called Austria 1848 to 1849.
Yeah.
And I think he published it himself.
Right.
Didn't turn out real well for him, I understand.
But at any rate, he, from what I understand, Savannah was very oppressive during the summer, and a lot of mosquitoes, and the people in Savannah liked, I guess the wealthier people wanted to come to the mountains, the up country in the summer times, and William Henry Stiles bought this land, and apparently there was a trapper hut about a mile down the river, over on a bluff that overlooks the river, and that's where he built Etowah Cliffs. I don't know why we call it Etowah instead of Etowah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Etowah.
That's what the way my grandparents said Etowah.
Now tell us about that house. I remember it.
Well, it was built at two different. It was a frame structure that was built originally, I suppose, and then later on they had added a masonry structure, and I remember it too. And it was half of it was very, very nice looking, and the other half, they just didn't go together. I mean, the architecture, it was clapboard on one end and stucco on the other, and kind of a unusual house.
From where we sit today, where was that house?
It would be a mile west.
Okay. And what happened to it?
Well, I remember it fell into disrepair, as a lot of the old houses did. I remember the People's Valley Schoolhouse, and Summerland was another Stiles house, and I guess during the Depression, and then thereafter, people didn't have the money to keep up the old houses, and some were, but a lot were not. And when I was in grade school and in high school, it was vacant, and I can remember a lot of people thought it was haunted and would go out there at night. And then one night, apparently somebody built a fire and it burned. Probably, I'm guessing, it's 1965-ish.
Somewhere, yeah,
like
somewhere in that time period, with 5 or 10 years.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
But William Henry Stiles, the original, had a group of children, and the first son was another William Henry, and the second son was Robert Mackey Stiles, and he married a lady named Margaret Cooper, Couper, who was from Brunswick, and her father was his name was James Hamilton Cooper, and he was a very noted architect and writer and planter.
Now, you gave me a book several years ago that I really enjoyed called Rice Gold.
That's right.
About the life of James Hamilton Cooper. Right. And now the Cooper family, didn't they live in the islands?
They had a house named Altama that was built out of tabby, and it was near Brunswick. And Malbone is a very, very close replica. If you see a photograph, there is a photograph of Altama in White Columns of Georgia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll look at that when I get home.
Well, you can look at it when we take a break.
Okay.
I have one somewhere. But it's very striking, the resemblance of the two houses. Of course, Altama was very much older. But Margaret Cooper married Robert Mackey Stiles, who was William Henry's second son, and then they built Malbon.
They built
this house.
Okay, now the Cooper family, they also, was a John Cooper. Would that be James Hamilton Cooper's father, maybe?
I have no idea.
Okay. Now, I know there's another book that's been published, it's on Amazon now, about the life of John Cooper and Cannon Point on St. Simon's Island.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
All right. Well, I just found it. As a matter of fact, I found it yesterday, and I'm going to buy it on Amazon, and it's got great reviews. But I remember, now I've read 2 books by a relative of yours, probably a great aunt. What's the name? Caroline
Cooper Lovell.
Lovell.
Right.
Now
she would be a cousin.
Okay, she wrote a book. The first book she wrote, published in the 1930s, was called Golden Isles of Georgia, and I bought that several years ago. And that book picks up from a manuscript that John Cooper started on the history of the islands, going back to Spanish occupation forward. And he had a written manuscript, but he died with a ship sinking somewhere off of the East Coast. He was going to New York, the ship sunk, but she had that manuscript and enlarged upon it, and it's a great book. It is the book on the history of the Golden Isles. And she tells a lot about the Cooper family and got me real interested in it 20 years ago maybe. And I went to St. Simon's and in the cemetery there at Midway. There's all kind of Coopers buried there. James Hamilton Cooper, John Cooper. No, John Cooper's not. He's in the Atlantic Ocean, I guess.
But maybe there's a bunch of them to him.
Was there a Wiley family connection?
Yes.
What is that?
Well, I don't know, but I know that Margaret Cooper, who built this house, middle name was Wiley.
Okay.
So there is a connection there.
Now, Caroline, the second book that Caroline Cooper Lovell wrote, really delved into life at Edward Cliff.
That's right. That's right.
Etowah.
Right.
How you say it?
I say it Etowah.
Etowah. Okay. Well, she apparently came up here during the summer, every summer, with a number of cousins.
Well, now hang on. Now you're getting it all confused.
All right, tell me.
Well, her mother and father built this house, and the Light of Other Days, there's a portion of that where she talks about the building of Malbon.
And talks about the cousins coming out.
That's right.
Julia Gordon Lowe, founder of the Girl Scouts, was one of those cousins.
On the other side.
In a book, her autobiography talks about being a cousin coming and spending summers here. Right.
And it was interesting, just a minute ago, you were talking about John Cooper being lost at sea, and apparently there was a lot of sea travel between the northeast and the south, because my grandfather had a sister who was lost at sea.
Really?
Yeah, and it was a German U-boat during World War I, sank a transport. And then there's another connection with the sea. All of the Stiles that came to Savannah were in shipping. There was one of the older Stiles that lived in Bermuda. And then there were a lot of cousins in England, and Malbone was built in 1870, which is a little unusual for a house of this size to be built during Reconstruction. And the way they were able to do it was because of their cousins in England who did not suffer from the war between the states. And I think I read that in the light of other days too.
Okay, now, all right, let me get this straight. William Henry Stiles, I believe, was a colonel and raised a regiment during the Civil War.
So. That's right.
And his two sons, Robert
Mackey,
right, and William Henry Jr.
Right.
And they both fought in the Civil War.
I believe so.
What happened to them?
I don't know.
Okay.
I do know that William Henry II survived the war, and I think he was in business with Mark Cooper, or in the mining business at some point, because I've read about him. Apparently there was a panic and he was suffering from melancholy and that sort of stuff. It may have been Caroline Lovell writing about that. And now here's the thing about The Light of Other Days. I get a little bit confused because she wrote the book in manuscript form years ago, of course, and then they published it relatively recently. And I read the manuscript, and I don't know how much has been edited out. I may be remembering stuff that didn't make the cut on the book.
Well, if you read the manuscript, I think that would be more accurate than what was in the book.
In my memory, it's a lot longer. Maybe the book was condensed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of that, but at any rate, I do know that William Henry Jr. was killed by a bull.
Yeah, I read that
in some of the readings.
Well, I also read that Robert had a buggy accident.
That's right.
Right where you turn on Etowah Drive, just past Presbyterian Church.
Right, where Regions Bank is now.
That apparently his buggy turned over, and so they both came to untimely deaths.
Yeah.
But their children stayed on.
Well, one child stayed here.
And that would be?
Hamilton Stiles was his name. And I think he was county commissioner at one point back in the 20s. He was very active in the community. And I know he was a member of the Harley Farmers Club. And of course, that would have been back in the 20s and 30s.
Now, I finally remember Mr. Bob.
Yeah.
And anybody that knew him knows who Mr. Bob was.
Right.
Tell us who Mr. Bob was.
Well, now his name was Robert Mackey Stiles, but he was the son of the third William Henry. That was the Stiles branch at Etowah Cliffs. The Robert Mackey side of the family, they got married or moved, and there was the one Hamilton left. And as he got older, my grandfather, Bob Stiles, was very interested in farming, and there weren't a lot of people interested in farming. And so Hamilton was a farmer, and so he sort of took over the operations he called him Cud and Hammy, and then, over time acquired the interests of the other cousins, and that's how the farm came to be.
And Mr. Bob and his wife, who was, I think, a McGowan.
That's right, her name was Susan McGowan.
And they lived in this house.
In this house.
For many, many, many years.
From the time they got married until the time they died.
All right, tell us about the McGowan family.
Well, they were from Harley, and of course Presbyterians, and I can't remember, well I can, but I don't want to take the time to try to recount all the brothers and the sisters, but I know that one of them, Sam McGowan, was the mayor of Cartersville at one time.
Tragically murdered.
Yeah, tragically murdered, and his daughter still lives in his house, which is on West Main, just down from Presbyterian Church. And then there was another son, Homer, who married one of Don Hancock's daughters, who had the Southland ice and coal. And so those were the two that stayed connected with Cartersville the most. And then another sister married Wesley Roberts, and they ran the DeSoto Hotel in Kingston for years.
Yeah.
I finally remember going over to Kingston.
Now, you mentioned a moment ago another house besides Etowah Cliff.
Right.
and Malbone. You mentioned Summerlin.
Summerlin.
Tell us about Summerlin.
Well, it was on the. It was about another mile south of Atoa Cliffs, which would be 2 miles from here, on the river. All the houses were on the river, and it was a 2-story, imposing two-story piazza, soft brick, heart pine.
I remember that house too. What happened to it?
It was actually demolished. It was a local celebrity, Sparky Smith, reclaimed the wood and the brick and sold them. But it was in bad shape, and I know a lot about building, and it may have been the best thing. As much as I hate to see an old building torn down, I don't know if there was much.
Was there a Philip Stiles?
That's who owned it.
Lived in, okay,
Yeah,
that lived
Philip
in that
owned
house.
it. He was my grandfather's brother.
Okay. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah.
Now, William Henry Stiles, during the period of time before he and his wife moved to Cass County, at some point in time established a friendship with Robert E. Lee and his wife, Mary Custis Lee. Tell us about that.
Well, that's one I don't know so much about. There is mention of that in the Light of Other Days. I'm trying to think if there was a connection at West Point, and I'm pretty sure that may have been where it was.
Actually, you want me to tell you?
Yeah, I would. But is it William Henry or Robert Mackey?
It was William Henry, and they met when Robert E. Lee, right after he graduated from West Point, was given a Corps of Engineers assignment in the Savannah vicinity.
Was that Cockspur Island?
I don't remember, but he did.
May have been Tabby, but now it's coming to me.
He did the defensive fortifications engineering work and spent some time in Savannah, and then and they made friends there.
That's right.
And then when they all were in Washington, they continued that friendship.
Okay.
And apparently it was a lifelong friendship, a lot of correspondence. I think you may have some of those letters.
Probably do, yeah.
All right, tell us. There's been several books written some I've mentioned, but there's one that I would call, or a series of books I would call historical fiction by Eugenia Price.
Right.
I don't think your family had a very good relationship with Eugenia Price.
Well, I think we did. I mean, she came up a couple of times, and she, being historical, she wanted everything accurate as much as possible.
What were the name of those books? I don't remember.
Oh, it was the heroine was Eliza Stiles, who was William Henry I's wife, and that's who the main character was. But gosh, I can't.
Well, 3 of them, and I can't remember the name of them. But what I had heard, and I believe your mother told me, that she loaned them a lot of family papers and had some difficulty getting them.
No, I don't think that's. Mom's got that confused with some guy that was doing his doctorate at Emory or somewhere.
Well, those 3 books, whatever they're named, by Eugenia Price, pretty much center around your family.
That's
am
right.
I right?
Yeah, Eliza Stiles.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, and she's the one that built the Atoa Cliffs, and from what I know, she actually ran the farming operation while William Henry was off being a politician.
Yeah.
So I think she was a very strong woman, and I think that those books are based fairly accurately on what happened.
All right, now let's talk about your family history of the Knight family. Knight family has been in Bartow County how long?
Well, I would say since before the Civil War. Knight Mercantile was founded in 1866 by Aaron Knight, and of course that business survived through 5 generations. There was something, maybe in the Light of Other Days, about the Stiles had bought a radio and couldn't figure out how to work it, and Fred Knight Sr. came out and was so nice to help them, figure out how it.
Now Aaron Knight, is that his house on Forest Avenue?
I believe so.
Corner of Forest Avenue and what is that, Nelson?
No, it's not Nelson.
Whatever it is.
Stonewall, maybe.
Yeah, right in that vicinity, 2-story house recently been restored.
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
So was it Aaron Knight that started
That's right.
Knight Mercantile Company?
That's right.
And then who was Bob Knight?
Well, Aaron had a son named James, and then James had 3 sons, and Bob was one of those. He would have been my great uncle, my grandfather's brother.
Okay.
My grandfather was Fred Sr., but he did not work at Knight Mercantile. He worked at the First National Bank.
Mm-hmm.
And so Bob is the one that you remember. And he had also had a brother named Jack that worked at Knight Mercantile.
Now you, your father, I believe, went to West Point.
He did. He graduated in 1946, and then he, when he graduated, went to Japan and spent 3 or 4 years there in the Reconstruction or the occupation with under General MacArthur, and resigned his commission because things kind of slowed down in the military business. And then he and his brother John ran Knight Mercantile for years.
Mm-hmm. And then when did Knight Forest Products spin off from Knight Mercantile?
Well, actually, it didn't spin off. We split it. John had an interest in the hardware store, and then my dad retired, and I had an interest in the lumber business. And there were 2 separate, business models, and so we just split the assets. And Knight Forest Products is, Knight Mercantile. We just changed the name.
Now, I noticed driving off of what I call Chulio Road, and everybody else still calls you Harley Road. Is it Chulio Road to you?
No, it's Harley Road to me.
I'm sorry, it's Chulio Road to me. That's what
I
it
think
used
it's
to be.
just a matter of where you're going.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that the Malbone property is heavily in agriculture now.
That's right. That's right.
Big corn crop.
That's right.
So how many acres are there altogether?
Well, right now 450 acres, and of that, probably 300 in corn.
Okay.
We, I guess for 25 years, grew sod, and of course, people are not building houses, so there's no demand for sod, or very limited demand for sod. But corn, we've done very well with it.
Yeah. So has Malbone / Summerlin / Etowah Cliff been in constant agricultural activity since the late 30s, 40s, whenever the first house was built?
Yeah, I never remember there not being agricultural activity out here.
All right, now, Fredrick, tell us about your siblings and your children, bringing us up to date to current times.
Okay, well, my grandparents, Bob and Susie Stiles, on the Stiles side, had only one daughter. Her name is Margaret. She was born in the master bedroom here, and then she married Fred Knight Jr., who's my father, and they had 3 children, myself, and then I have a sister, Marty, and a sister, Susan. And Marty has 3 children, and Susan has 1. And I have 3 children.
All right, tell us about your children.
The oldest is named Robert Stiles Knight, after Bob Stiles, my grandfather, who spent a lot of time with me. He had retired from active farming when I came along, but of course never really retired. And I spent a lot of time with him building fences and baling hay, and loved every minute of it. And then my second son is named Stovall Knight, and he's named after his mother's grandmother, who was a Stovall from Madison, Georgia. And then my youngest is Julia Caroline Knight, we call Caroline. And she's a student at Columbus State, and Stovall is going into the Navy next week. He's going to Newport, Rhode Island to Officer Candidate School. I'm very proud of that. My grandfather, of course, was, his grandfather, my father, was graduate of West Point in 1946. And Bob Stiles had a brother named William Henry Stiles IV, who graduated from Annapolis in about 1926.
So it's a family tradition.
It's a family tradition. Yeah. A lot of military and both sides of the family. So I'm very proud of Stovall.
Well, Fredrick, it's incredible to have one family have the same plantation / farm property for that many generations.
Thank you.
And I know you're proud of it.
I am.
And I think Bartow County is proud of the heritage, people in Bartow County, of the heritage and the association with your many distinguished families. and I want to tell you how much I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you helping me recount all that.
All right.